Hey guys, my name is Rai. Today I wanted to go through how I did my plus 19 Priory on my Master Harmony Brewmaster Monk, including every pull, every gather, some of the decision making that I make when approaching this key, and how to approach the more difficult pulls in this dungeon. This is the second time I've timed this key on Brew. I said the first time a couple weeks ago, but I think that overall this is a pretty easy brew key. But I think one of the challenges and mistakes that a lot of brew players make involves around gathers, how they spend their resources, and how they plan for next pulls. Contrary to playing a Vengeance Demon Hunter, a prop Paladin, or a prop Warrior, the way that Brewmaster cooldowns work aren't intuitive. You're actually playing a reverse game here when thinking about your life, your resources, and your skill management. In Prior specifically, this is a very heavy white hit dungeon where you're going to have to be rotating a lot that mini game of really maximizing your purifying brews and as well working around your celestial brews and your defensive cooldowns to deal with a lot of rot damage from white swings. In this dungeon, I'm going to show you exactly what I do here in the first pull and how I get everything together and make it very, very easy on me. I don't feel like I'm ever in danger in this dungeon until the Paladin pull, and it's actually due to a pretty critical mistake. But again, I was able to encounter and, approach this dungeon very easily the first time I was in here, and I think we two-shot it, and again, we two-shot this Resilient Keystone with a new team. I am shrouding up here to skip the first two knights and pulling all these footmen. Watch carefully what I do here to make sure that Guard Captain Solomon comes in early. I want to make sure that I hit Crackling Jade Lightning on him first to get him in combat, so I initiate a little bit of threats, and then I'm going to speed taunt him in to make sure that I get some space on him. Once he's in, I'm hitting Keg Smash, I'm hitting Black Oak Kick, and immediately here too, you could see that I started this pull. Once I'm settled, I want to make sure that I use a Black Oak Kick for that Breath of Fire for the extra 5% DR, and I'm going to be feeding the rest of my Black Oak Kicks into my Tiger's Palm. Ideally, in this pull, you never want to be hitting Black Oak Kick into anything but your Dragon's Breath, your Keg Smash, or your Tiger's Palm. If you really, really need to, you can definitely throw it into some Celestial Brew action. However, mostly to do with Celestial Brew, you're going to be just overcapping anyway, so I would recommend, as much as you can, follow that Black Oak Kick into Keg Smash, Tiger's Palm, or Dragon Breath combo. Ideally, on paper and in a vacuum, your biggest resource gain here is going to be from pressing that Black Oak Kick into Tiger's Palm. As you can see throughout this pull, I didn't really have to use too much, but for every time I'm getting slammed by Guard Captain Solomon, I want to make sure that I'm topped. So the order of operations, and what I talk about frequently, is every time you're about to take a tank buster, and let's back up a little bit here, is you want to make sure that you are topped with something like Expel Harm, or pressing a Celestial Brew for the tank buster. But watch very carefully here as I set up. On the very first one, I hit that Celestial Brew, and I'm managing my resources very carefully. I'm getting that Black Oak Kick into Fire Breath, I'm hitting Fort Brew just to stabilize myself, and I'm just slamming into those Tiger's Palms. Anytime I'm hitting a Shield Slam, I'm trying to hit a Purify after or hit that Celestial Brew beforehand, but my imperative is to make sure that I'm absolutely topped so I don't take one of these Shield Slams natty. A secondary note too is that this Thunderclap is magic, so if you need to use some coverage here and use Diffuse Magic, it can help you sustain yourself when dealing with that slam. Notice how comfy I am here. I haven't even had to hit that Black Ox Brew, even though I probably should have hit a little bit earlier. But I can get through this pull very easily with a limited amount of healing and a lot of self-sustain just on my own. I did do this dungeon on 20, although we didn't time it, and I didn't have really too many issues living, but look how carefully and look how methodical I am about spending my resource. Again, Brew is all a minigame about planning your brews out properly. It is not about how you use your Fort Brew or your Dampen. You just want to make sure that you're playing that minigame about not overspending your Purifies. Secondly, you want to make sure that you're not capping on Celestial Brews if you can. If you're playing Master of Harmony, remember your Celestial Brew has 2 charges, meaning that you can use it offensively and defensively if you need. In this pull, I do make a little bit of mistake, and I do Exploding Keg a little bit early, which kind of sucks. What kind of resulted in this is meaning that I lost quite a bit of damage, not having Exploding Keg out early, but the grouping was a little bit sad. So ideally here, once everything would have been grouped, I would have been able to hit that Exploding Keg for threat. Another mistake I do see a lot of Brewmasters do is they just don't use Exploding Keg at all for threats, and they just use it for big damage. But one of your best sources of threat generation on Brew or Snap Threat is that Exploding Keg combo. So making sure you get your Breath of Fire up, you hit Exploding Keg, when everything's kind of grouped together, it's going to be a ton of Snap Threat. So making sure that if you are struggling on threats or you need to get Snap Threat because your DPS popped their CDs, just slam that Exploding Keg. Worry less about your damage from your weapons order or trying to really min-max it, and just go ahead and use it off cooldown. In this pull specifically, all we're kind of doing is blasting chainmail. I'm not too scared here, but one of the biggest things that I want to make sure I do is have that fortifying brew up for the next pack. As I finish off chainmail, I'm starting to think about what I kind of need resource-wise, and I am going to be showing you what I do in this route to make sure that we are pretty quick. I roll ahead here, I hit Sea Lust in a second, and I'm going to go into this next pull. In this pull, I'm going to be pulling this Conjurer Priest Light Spawn pack with the mini boss and as well as all these Neophytes. These Neophytes absolutely slam Brewmaster and they're all going to be white hit damage, so I need to make sure that I rotate my CDs appropriately. However, once I'm in the pack, I have my Blackout Kick Breath of Fire, and I'm kind of sustaining myself with just my regular rotation, with Keg Smash on CD, and really trying to manage that Purify game. I'm going to be pretty immortal in this pull. Watch carefully here how I set up my order of operations and how we made a mistake. So I called for us to get kicks back there, but we actually ended up stopping the Conjurer in the back, so it's going to come in pretty late. As soon as I'm in the pool, I have that weapons order ramped, I'm in that fortifying brew, and now I'm ropping in that one lone caster. Once I have all these mobs on me and I have that empowered breath of fire, I'm going to be making sure that I'm just rotating my CBs and my purifies and not overcapping and spending my CBs too early, or so my purifies. Look how much I ride my red stagger here until I actually hit purify. I'm trying to time my purify brews around my Gin Impalers to make sure I get a little bit of self-sustain if I need to, and then I'm just clearing it when I need to. Even though Purify is lit up with red stagger, as you could see here in the middle of my screen, I'm hitting 170, 180%. I don't care and I don't panic. I never really tell my healer I'm scared until I actually feel like I'm scared. Until I'm at this point now where I've exhausted all my buttons. If you're a healer watching this video and you're curious about just watching this because you want to know how Brewmaster works, the things that you should be tracking on Brewmaster are Dampen Harm, Warp Brew, and Black Ox Brew. When a Brewmaster has no charges of Purify available, no Celestial Brew, no Black Ox, no Fort Brew, and no Dampen, then they're going to be a little bit scared. Dampen is also a fake cooldown, only really good for a little bit of damage smoothing and big tank busters, but ultimately the only thing you really care about on Brewmaster is managing your Purify Brew and your Celestial Brew. So once you're out of these three things, Purify, CB, and Black Ox Brew is when you need to be a little bit more worried. Now that the Neophytes are dead in this bowl, anything that is dangerous to me is gone and out of this encounter. So I'm going back to just hitting Amia and cleaving down both the Light Spawn and the Conjurer. We do want to make sure we kick Amia out here, and I try to speed taunt her, but you know, she does get a little bit of a heal off, which is not that big of a deal. In this next part of this pull, I am going to be pulling in the second Light Spawn pack here as this Conjurer dies, and I'll be chaining in. Specifically, if you are playing Brewmaster, you need to understand that a lot of the utility that you have is controlling your team around your kicks. In all my groups with Brewmaster, I set up 2 sets of kicks. And for instance, in this one, it's me and Sparky, our shaman, that are kicking usually the star targets. And then I have Sculpey and Owang set up on our circle or our other marker. One of the mistakes I see a lot of Brewmasters make as well is how they spend those Blackout kicks. You'll notice in a lot of these pulls, I'm just hitting that Blackout kick into Tiger's Palm or Blackout kick into Breath of Fire if I need to redo or reapply my additional 5% DR. If you need to use Blackout kick into Keg Smash, it's perfectly fine, but at most cost and in most cases, you really want to avoid that Blackout kick Purify combo. It does absolutely nothing for you and will not provide you any sort of long-term utility, and if anything, will kind of mess you up. Pausing your stagger tick is only going to overheal you with your Ox Orbs and put you in kind of an odd predicament. As you can see here, I'm trying to speed taunt out the mini boss here. I did get him right at the end, and we did manage to get Tainer out of the Light Spawn pull. In this next pull, I'm pulling in this Conjurer Priest Footman pack in a Tainer. I'm setting up our kicks. I'm going to wrap them in here, and as well, once this pack is settled, I'm going to try to get it off the stairs. This first Ember Storm is a little bit annoying, but one setup you're going to see I do a lot is as soon as I get our first and second round kicks, I end up hitting that leg sweep. Once that's established, we can go into the next set of stops, which is usually my Thunderstorm Gap from our Enhancement Shaman or our Resto Shaman, and then going into first kicks again. Again, Tiger's Palm, Blackout Kick, Tiger's Palm, Breath of Fire, and if I need to, I'll just hit that Tiger's Palm into Keg Smash. Remember, if you watch any of my other videos, I talk a lot about how Tiger's Palm, the Blackout combo, isn't always the easiest thing that you could be doing. Although on paper and in a vacuum, it is your highest, reduction in damage taken per second by, having some brew CDR and your most damage, you're not going to always be able to spend all your Black Oak kicks on Tiger's Palm. It's going to be almost impossible a lot of the time, as you're going to find yourself energy starved in some situations. This pull I decided to do here actually seems a little bit daunting from a melee team perspective, but it's actually really easy once you get into it. We do have 4 casters here, a footman, and as well a light spawn. A conjurer. So with this in mind, we do have a ton of kicks here, but once we get our kicks established and that thunderstorm cap set up, you're going to see that the cap gets a second stun. We just go into 4 kicks. Once those kicks are out, you're going to see here that I can rop them out. We can do something like leg sweep, cover those casts, and this pull just absolutely gets melted. I think doing a lot of these like caster pulls seem really, really daunting for a melee team when you don't have things like grip, beam, silence sigil. But once you actually establish like a kick rotation, a kick order, and a stop order, everything just gets melted. Melee teams have a pretty easy time in shutting down some of these caster pulls, and I think we had a really easy time too, especially having never played together by handling this dungeon. Now, this is where the dungeon goes a little bit wrong. When I go in here, my goal is I want to CC 1 Warlynx and 1 Sharpshooter. The reason why I want to do this is I want to bring 3 mobs under the boss and fight 5 at the same time. However, things go awry when we end up using our sap and our paralysis and the CC ends up breaking, which I think could have actually been from my keg smash. Why that this is important is playing all these lynxes on boss without a mage for mirror images can be a little bit tedious, and I didn't want to do it all at once. You're going to see here that as we kind of shroud through and we pull, I end up trying to use Crackling Jade Lightning, and as this Crackling Jade comes in, I hit that Blackout kick and everything seems to break. It does look like the Shaman's Chain Lightning seemed to break everything, but it's pretty unlikely that did happen, so what I end up deciding to do here, in which it loses us quite a bit of time, is I end up saying, like, let's commit and kill this back. Typically, I wanted to showcase how you can live this pull going into boss pretty easily by just breaking it up a little bit. But unfortunately, in this case, I did make the call that our timer was like exceptionally good. We had the count we needed, so we were going to go and burn down these lynxes so that we didn't wipe on the boss. As you can see, just because of how frantic everything was here, I did have to commit health bots and as well, you know, have to kind of frantically panic heal myself to get stable, but all in all, we do manage to stabilize and kill off this pack pretty quickly. I do slam that Black Oak kick CB there just as I didn't have a lot of Purify resources kind of going on, and I want to make sure that I'm stable but when going into the boss. This next boss is actually surprisingly easy on Brewmaster, and I think going into this season, I had my doubts that it was going to be, you know, easy. I thought it was going to be quite challenging, because anytime you have a boss with tank busters and a bleed, you know, you can fall apart pretty quickly. As I go into the boss, my first 2 globals are that Black Oak Kick Breath of Fire for the additional DR, but as you can see, it only hits 1 mob and ends up missing Captain Dalcry. I think Breath of Fire has a pretty terrible hitbox. I'm still surprised they haven't fixed it, but that's okay, as I do reapply it after, even without the DR. On single target encounters, for every one of these Pierce Bleeds, you're going to notice that I either pop a Celestial Brew, or I use some sort of cooldown. My first order of operations on a boss like this is always use your Celestial Brews first, your Black Ox Brew second to refresh your Celestial Brews, and then anytime you don't have a Celestial Brew for a Tank Buster or a stack of Purify, you want to make sure you're covering with an additional button. Again, the way Brewmaster works, and I alluded to it at the start of this video a little bit, is you're on this mini game of resource management. You really want to make sure that you're not overlapping, too hard your big defensive buttons like your Dampen Harm, your Dwarf if you're playing Dwarf or Bleed Clear, your Fort Brew, and as well your CBs or your Purifies. Watch carefully throughout this encounter how little I actually spend my Purifies and how I don't panic. I do have a Resto Druid giving me passive healing, but even if I'm looking at this healing meter across this encounter, you're going to notice that a lot of my healing is due to my own self-sustain. Watch carefully when I use things like Expel Harm, when I decide to cast those Purifies, and how I stabilize myself after Tank Busters. Remember, when you're getting hit by a Tank Buster in Brewmaster, you always want to consider 3 things. The period before you get hit, the period when you get hit, and the period after you get hit. If you break every single Tank Buster into this kind of, sectional 3 parts, it's going to be really easy to handle any sort of keystone as soon as you get there. Before the hit, I always want to be topped. I want to make sure that I either hit Expel Harm to put myself to full, I hit Celestial Brew to give myself a buffer, or as well, I hit a big healing cooldown like a health pots, Vivify, or call for some sort of external healing. I always want to make sure that I'm anywhere from 70% to 100% before most tank busters. On the tank buster hit itself, I always want to make sure I'm covered. When I talk about covered tanking, it means that I have some sort of defensive available for the initial hit. I want to make sure that I have Celestial Brew active, and if I don't have Celestial Brew, then I have Black Ox Brew, and if I can't snap a Celestial Brew with Black Ox Brew, I want to cover it with Fort Brew, Dampen Harm, or in case of magic damage, Diffuse Magic. Once that tank hit goes, I want to make sure that I can purify. I never want to purify before the tank buster, I always want to purify after to clear that tank buster from that stagger that I am staggering, and as well use that to heal myself with Jin Impalers. So again, watch here throughout this encounter, as every time I take a tank buster, I'm following the same order of operations. I want to make sure that I'm taking the tank buster with that Celestial Brew if I can, or I use a trinket like I do here, and then use my Celestial Brew for damage. I did cap on Celestial Brew there and just decided to send it for damage a little bit, but again, I'm following that same order of operation. I want to avoid at all cases on this encounter, making sure that I Black Oak Kick Purify. I always want to be Black Oak Kick and a Tiger's Palm or Kick Smash for Brew CDR. I take the tank buster, I immediately purify, and as well, I go into my next order of operations. Again, Tiger's Palm, Black Oak Kick, Tiger's Palm, Black Oak Kick, Tiger's Palm, Breath of Fire, Tiger's Palm, into that Keg Smash if I need Brew CDR. But again, watch out carefully here. It's like, I'm just sitting on these purifies right now, and even though I'm red stagger, I'm not hitting it. The reason why is I know I'm going to take a tank buster soon, or I want to stabilize myself before the tank buster. I have Celestial Brew available, I have a Fort Brew kind of proc active, I have Dampen Harm if I need to, and I think I end up like accidentally hitting Diffuse Magic on air. But again, doesn't matter too much as I'm only using those, purifies to clear myself from those tank busters. Watch it very carefully here as, I do end up fat fingering that Diffuse Magic on air. It's actually a really, really good defensive on this encounter, specifically dealing with Divine Judgment, but I am okay as I take the Judgment, I purify, and I hit the Trinket on the bleed. Again, I'm not panicking, I still have my Black Ox Brew available, and throughout this encounter, you never see that I'm ever in a point of danger. I don't think I actually call for Bark on this encounter, and if I do, I apologize, but I just wanted to showcase too that you don't need an external, and often too, I assume a lot of you are playing with Resto Shamans or have been, and it's really good to learn how to tank without playing with an external. I do really, really like that Ritual Mud Trinket in this Keystone, as it does get an insane value on this boss, as, I can just press it, and it gets its cooldown back really, really, really quickly. As this boss is going down, I want to start thinking about what I need for the next pull. I made it through Captain Dalcry pretty easily, and without too much of a problem. I do manage to throw out some Vivifies there on my party, and as well, I'm thinking about what I need for the next pull. I hit that Celestial Brew on that Tank Buster, I Purify after the Pierce Armor, and as well, I'm back in the encounter, but I want to make sure that I have a couple things ready. I'm going to be fighting the big Paladin pull. I'm not going to be pulling the whole room, but I'm going to be pulling a couple Paladins. I want to make sure that I have Fort Brew, Dampen Harm, Diffuse Magic, and as well, something in the Gather. I'm either going to need Iron Bark on the Gather, or I'm going to want to use my Ritual Mud Trinket. But ideally here, I don't use too much. I will be using Fort Brew as soon as I'm settled in the pack, and you're going to watch carefully how I gather this. I'm going to go in here with Tiger's Lust and my Ritual Mud Trinket, and I think my healer does spark me here. I don't think I needed Bark on the go because I'm going to be using Fort Brew here as I get situated, but I want to make sure I go into this corner, I hit that Breath of Fire, and as well, immediately I'm just hitting that Black Oak Kick Breath of Fire again as my first Breath of Fire didn't hit and everything. I'm immediately throwing that Chi Burst out, I'm in I'm in Fort Brew, and as soon as that Fort Brew ends, I'm going to be rotating a different defensive. Remember, on a pull like this, Diffuse Magic is insanely overpowered as it's going to reduce the damage that you take from not only some of the magic hits in here, but as well each one of those Divine Tolls. Anytime I drop a little bit low, I'm starting to consider if I need Leg Sweep or if I need to use that Ring of Peace, and I need to be very careful here because those Templars are the thing that is really messing me up in this pull. I'm really dry here at the end here as I hit that Dampen Harm, and you're going to see here that I roll away to get a little bit of distance. I do get scared because the overlap of these Templars with that Divine Toll is what's killing me. I do gain a little bit of distance here as I Fort Brew proc, and I want to make sure that I'm away from these mobs until I can farm back some Purifying Brews. Again, it's okay if you need to kite on Brewmaster. I played this pull okay. I hadn't done this pull in almost a month, So me coming in here, I made a couple mistakes going in, but you're going to see that I followed the same order of operations. When my fort brew ended, I was very, very careful about my purify management, trying to use gin and balers, and making sure that I didn't overlap things like my fort brew, my dampen, and didn't panic on those purifies until the very end. Remember, like I said, at the end of this bowl, you're always going to feel like you're dry. There are definitely different ways you can handle it, but, Resto Druid and Arshaman both have a lot of support for you. You just need to kind of call it. Ideally, what we should have done there is hit a Vortex, but, way she kind of goes. As I go into this bowl, I'm going to be killing off the Priest and then chaining in one of the packs from the side. Remember, I didn't do the entire room of Paladins, and I don't think it's really necessary. This key is timeable in 20 with splitting up this bowl. So I did decide that I was going to split up this bowl a little bit, pull all this together, and remember too, we are playing with an Outlaw Rogue who is capped at 7 targets. Once the Priest dies, I will be pulling in this other Paladin. I'll be hitting that Weapons of Order, Black Oak Kick, Breath of Fire, and start building my weapons on these targets. Ideally, I don't overcap too much on that Keg Smash, but I did end up overcapping there as I got a little bit frantic. So I did actually waste some Weapons of Order time, and I should have actually been hitting Keg Smash a little bit earlier. Again, once that Breath of Fire is rolling, I just want to be hitting even an AoE that Black Oak Kick into Tiger's Palm. Black Oak Kick Tiger's Palm does have a chance to proc that Facepalm talent, which is going to reduce my brews by an additional 1 second and do an absolute ton of damage. This pack gets absolutely melted as we're off to that last Paladin Templar. I'm going to be pulling in the last set of Paladins here, which is 2 Paladins and 2 casters. I do kind of get everything figured out here as I hit a Purify to top myself. I Black Oak Kick. I hit a big Celestial Brew to stable myself with that Black Oak combo, and I rop them out of the Consecrate. Remember to, again, don't panic. If you need to hit your Black Oak Kick into a Keg Smash, it's perfectly fine if you need that Brew CDR immediately. I am playing 1 point in Anvil and Stave in here, which also probably, if you're watching this video and I had somebody ask me the other day, Rye, whenever I do watch you or I do tune in, I notice that you have way better brew CDR than I do. Like your brews come up way faster. I feel like, I don't know what the difference is. Is it haste? Is it what? I think the biggest thing is if you're playing Brewmaster, you need to understand that your entire resource management comes from Keg Smash and Tiger's Palm. So the faster that you hit those Keg Smashes, you use your Weapons of Order properly, and you TP, right? Like you're going to be getting more Brew CDR. You're going to come back quicker on your Celestial Brew and your Purify, and it's going to be a lot easier for you to manage your self-sustain. Remember too, that 1 point in Anvil and Stave is actually like a ton of value for me, and I dropped 1 point in High Tolerance for it. It does mean that, every time I dodge, I do reduce my cooldowns, my brews by 0.5. Over the course of the key, I found out it did give me about, 8 or 9 more Celestial Brews, which is kind of cool for 1 talent points. Overall, it's not like insanely game-changing, but it is nice, and I didn't even find the point in High Tolerance that impactful. On this boss, you're going to be seeing that I always soak just 2 of the soaks, and then I leave my DPS to the 3rd one. You're going to see here that every time here, I do make this cheat code, which is I abuse Speed Taunt. Anytime we finish that Castigator Shield, I am using Speed Taunt to get the boss back in a favorable position for my team. I did miss my last Breath of Fire because of that damn hitbox, but I do put it back up there with Empowered Breath of Fire, and I'm back to be able to just slamming the boss. This boss is really, really easy on Brew, and if you really need to soak all 3 or even 4 or 5 of the stack, all you need to do is hit Diffuse Magic. Diffuse Magic is going to reduce the magic damage you take of that debuff by 60% for 5 seconds. So, if you get into this and soak a couple times, hit a Celestial Brew to stabilize, and then Diffuse for the last 2, you're going to have a really easy time. The other thing too is Ritual Mud works insane on this boss because you do get CDR from that ticking dot. There's realistically no dangerous threats to Brewmaster on Baron Braunpike, so next season, if you are going to be playing this dungeon, feel free to just use your defensives on that soak. When he does put his wings up, he does start hitting quite a bit harder, but remember on Brewmaster that you're going to be dodging every other attack anyway, just because of our mastery. When you do hit that Black Oak Kick, you do get that stack of Elusive Brawler, which means that you're going to have 100% dodge in the next melee, and you're going to be smoothing out your damage and take quite a bit. Baron does hit pretty slow for all intents and purposes, so I never feel like versus on VDH that I'm actually in danger if I do the soak. So you can see my team baits off there. I try to speed taunt, but he does start queuing up that sacrificial soak pretty quickly. So, you know, here we go here. Again, I get out here, I speed taunt to move him in position quite a bit quicker to increase our melee uptime. I'm hitting that weapons order, and I'm starting my single target rotation again. As you can see, that one trick that I really like on this encounter is making sure that I can bait off the shield drops on this fight. And this is going to be a thing for next season too. Or sorry, the hammer drops. If you're playing melee comp and you want to maximize uptime from your team, all you have to do is literally just walk in here, have your melee go off the boss when the hammers come out, and then speed taunt the boss away, and your melee uptime is going to be infinitely better on this encounter. As we get this Castigator shield too, remember every single time I'm just rolling out and I'm going to try to speed taunt. But look at that beautiful bait that my team did. They dropped them on the wall and now they can just keep hitting the boss. As the boss is about dead here, I do hit that touch of death and we're off to the last part of the dungeon. As we fight this Paladin pull, immediately I do get kind of given the opener, and I did have to blackout kick Purify instead of that Dragon's Breath. Unfortunately, I want to avoid that as much as possible, as blackout kick Purify does just suck, and it's a big waste of time. You want to be making sure that, again, you put those blackout kicks into that Tiger's Palm, into that Breath of Fire, or if you can, into that Kick Smash. Sometimes it does happen though, don't beat yourself up too much, and don't overthink it. I would worry most about, you know, solving that minigame for yourself, but your resource management, making creative uses of Ring of Peace and Leg Sweep when you feel like you overcommitted, or, you know, as well kiting if you need to. I did a pretty bad job at gathering this pull, and now that Ring of Peace is over in the back, I couldn't even get that, you know, heal kicked in from where it was. But that's okay, as we do manage to recover alright here, but I think I could have done a better job, and next time if I come back in here, I think I would have gone to this pull a little bit differently. So you can see even right here, I'm getting hit in the back a little bit as I kind of struggle to kind of get my footing on this Paladin pull. You know, I'm out of Purifying Brews. I don't want to slam that Trinket or that Fort Brew, so that wasn't one of my best pulls. I think I made a lot of mistakes there. I think Brewmaster too, it kind of suffers from the fact that once you start and you open a pack badly, it can kind of snowball. If you spend too many Purifies or Celestial Brews, or you panic in the opener, then you're just going to kind of run out of things. And that's where I see, like, in my VOD reviews and, like, when I open up streams, a lot of Brewmasters die. They simply will just go into a pack, like, they'll overcommit early, and then they're just kind of cooked, right? So ideally, too, go into a pack. Don't slam all those Purifies right away. Don't slam that double charge Celestial Brew if you're playing Master Harmony. Like, be very methodical. Trust the process, right? Like, trust that if you drop low, you have the ability to heal yourself. You have the ability to cover yourself with Celestial Brew. You have the ability to hit that Expel Harm if you need to, or that Health Bots. And then don't be afraid to just go into a pack with Dampen Harm or Fort Brew if you need to stabilize on the go. As this kind of pack goes down, I am trying to kite down the stairs. I do want to make sure that I utilize that speed taunt if I need to on the Paladin or the Light Spawn to make sure that my group doesn't get healed up, but I'm being very careful too about trying to play in a way in which is conductive of my team optimizing their damage. As this last toll goes out, I think we do lose somebody here. Yeah, we lose Sparky to that Purify Beam, but I think this pull goes alright as I do manage to get that Paladin out with that speed taunt. Sparky does run back, and we're on our way up to the next pull. I am going to be in-capping one of these priests. I think I could have pulled them all at once, but, you know, every single time I do it, I feel like it's just a little bit easier to just handle two casters. Remember, if you're only fighting two casters with this composition, all you need is 2 sets of kicks. What you can do is, if you want to fight 3 casters, is you can assign those kicks to each person, finish up with Sweep, go into Thunderstorm Cap, Shockwave Blind, and then you should have your kicks back again. But, you know, again too, there's no reason for me not to break this up as I have infinite time in this Keystone. See very carefully here how, again, like, I'm not really worried about anything, and I'm just kind of sitting on my Black Ox Brew. There's no reason for me really to rush that Black Ox brew if I don't really need to in the time. I kind of go in and just use it whenever I feel like I need some snap threat with spending that vitality resource, or if I need to just kind of use it as a defensive. Remember, Black Ox Brew again also is recoverable from Keg Smash and Tiger's Palm CDR. In addition to that, Anvil and Stave also reduces the cooldown of Black Ox Brew. Meaning that whenever you see I hit Black Ox Brew, I hit it about 30 seconds ago, I'm already going to have it up again in less than a minute. You're going to see that pretty quickly. If I'm creative enough, I can get my Black Ox Brew back every 50 seconds or so. This is insane value because Black Ox Brew reset does mean 2 free Purifies and 1 Celestial Brew. What that means with 1 Celestial Brew, remember too that it's going to be spending your Vitality resource and making you do more damage. Again, I go in here with that Black Oak Kick into that Keg Smash just for a little bit of Brew CDR, and as well now I'm starting to bank my resources for the mini boss pull. Brew compared to I think BDH has a lot easier of a time on this last Baron mini boss, but you still do need to respect it. And I think like one really important consideration too is when you go into these pulls, you got to think about what the tank busters are and how you're going to mitigate them. Not panicking is the key to doing well on Brewmaster and making sure that you're not overcommitting certain buttons. So again, you're going to see that as I go in here, I'm very, very careful about how I spend my Purifies, my CVs, my Fort Brew, and my Dampen. Remember too, this is a magic tank buster mini boss, which means that every single time that he does one of those slashes, I am going to be considering if I need to hit that diffuse. I do hit Celestial Brew right out the gates, and as well, once I get my combo set up here, I'm hitting that Fortifying Brew for that next Blazing Strike. I ended up making a mistake here and not Black Oak kicking for a while, or sorry, not Dragon's Breathing for a while, but it was a little bit of a lower priority for me as I did want to get that Weapons of Order ramped for my damage. As you can see, like my Druid's doing 5 million HPS here and sustaining us pretty easily, but again, any single one of these tank busters, I want to be really cognizant on if I need some coverage or need to press a button. Again, my Fort Brew's done in 3 seconds. I don't have Celestial Brews, but I do have that Black Ox Brew available, and I have that Dampen Harm. Again, I hit that Black Ox Brew and make sure that I have that 1 extra charge of Celestial Brew just so I'm not overcapping. I'm still sitting on Dampen and I'm more than fine as I hit that Purify into CB. I hit that Purify again, and as well if I need to top myself, I can. There's absolutely no reason for me not to have sent Dampen there if I needed to. And I think if you're in a place where you're trying to get used to brew defensives or you're just not used to the idea of working backwards with Purifies and Celestial Brews, I think just slamming Dampen Harm as part of your defensive rotation is really good. I think I would get in a habit though of making sure that you don't use Dampen Harm ever before the Celestial Brew. Celestial Brew is insanely powerful, and with enough stacks of your Purifying Brew, it is going to be able to cover almost any tank buster in the game. It actually might be the best tank cooldown in the entire game, considering you can get it on like a 15-second CD, and it ends up being your top heal in most keys. But remember, Celestial Brew also scales too with Purifying Brew. So every time you purify, you're going to get a stack of that Purifying Brew buff, which is going to increase the healing of your next Celestial Brew by up to 200%. Why that's important is you can also do that with Black Oak Kick. If you're in a pinch, and I remember there are a lot of times in the end of Dragonflight, like the last boss of Azure Vaults, I would actually need to hit that Black Oak Kick into Celestial Brew to survive the tank buster if I didn't have enough coverage. More often than not now, it's pretty unlikely that I have to do that, but however, if you're ever in a pinch and you need those Purify stacks because you either will die or you just need a little bit of extra support, you can do that as well. Remember, at all points, I want to try to avoid that Black Oak Kick Purify. It's sometimes just going to happen by merit of like how I play the game. But ideally too, I just want to be putting, especially on bosses, all those Black Oak Kicks into Tiger's Palms if I can, or into that Keg Smash. Sometimes you get those Black Oak Kick CBs or just those Purifies by instance of you trying to like sustain yourself or heal. But ideally, where I make a lot of mistakes in this encounter is I could have been spending a lot of those Black Oak Kicks into that Tiger's Palm. A lot more than I think I actually did here. I think my breakdown was about 70% of my Tiger's Palms. My Black Oak Kicks in this key were Tiger's Palms. I think I had about, 10% CB, about, I think it was like 9% Keg Smash, and I had like a couple Black Oak Kick Purifies here. But for the most part, I was pretty good. Ideally, in a perfect world, you just want to be using like that one Breath of Fire Black Oak Kick. On AoE, it's still pretty good too if you need Slam Hits. If you want to use Black Oak Kick on Keg Smash, ideally you can do that too. But again, you just want to be using as much resource as you can into those Black Kick Tiger's bombs. But I think the second thing that I would really recommend is if you're struggling with Brew a little bit or trying to pick it up for next season, don't overcomplicate it, right? Like just do your rotation, and if you need to like slam that, any button in between from here to there, focus on staying alive first and focus on that mini game. Focus on not overcommitting purifies and using things like expel harm or vivify if you need to gap fill, and the rest is going to come really easy. At this point in the encounter, there's not really much left for us to do. I think all I'm going to be doing here is tanking the boss to the back of the room as she casts that Stoke Flame, and as well, I'm just going to be hitting the boss. We do get a ROP here on the boss so that our Shaman can benefit from a little bit of funnel. I don't know if he ends up getting it off, but he does get a couple Flame Shocks out. And now I'm just going to be going into my Weapons of Order, slamming that Rising Sun Kick, slamming that Keg Smash, getting those Black Kick Tiger's Palms, and doing as much damage as I can. However, my time in this dungeon as a tank is over, and with that in mind, that is how I did my plus 19 Priory on my Brewmaster Monk. I think if I actually played Brew more a lot this season, rather than just logged in and did like 1 or 2 keys a week, I think I could have done this on 20, but season's kind of coming to an end, and I don't know if I really am going to have the time, nor do I really care to kind of do this. So, given that we have Priory again next season, hopefully this is a good starting point for you kind of picking up your Priory journey on Brewmaster, or maybe refining the skills you already have. With that in mind, hopefully this video helped you in becoming a better Brewmaster, taught you a thing or two, and more importantly, helped frame some of the mistakes I made. There's a lot of mistakes I did in here, whether small or large, that can definitely help you as well, or help me when reviewing this video. I think as well when I talk about how I do my gathers or how I combine my cooldowns, there's always something to improve in your keystones. If you haven't already, start recording your keys, start logging your keys, and start thinking about proactively how you can be a better tank. I think your own review is the most important and critical review in becoming a better Mythic Plus player. Again, thanks for tuning in, thanks for the support, and if you like this video or you think I missed anything, drop something in the comments. I'll catch you guys in the next one.